Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a case from Washington State that has really sparked immense concern. And it's raised some pretty profound questions about child welfare systems.
Absolutely.
You've brought us a stack of material news reports, a public petition, and our mission in this deep dive is, well, it's to help you cut through the complexity here.
Yeah, to understand the timeline, who the key people are.
Exactly. And critically, the specific questions these sources raise about the state's approach, to protecting vulnerable children.
It's a heartbreaking situation at its core involving a young girl named Oakley Carlson. And the materials, they lay on a timeline that becomes tragically unclear.
Yeah.
And it really highlights where some people feel the system, failed her. We're going to explore what stands out most when you look at these pieces together.
So let's begin where her story, as detailed in the sources, takes a really significant turn into foster care. Oakley Carlson was, about 9 months old?
Around 9 months, yeah, when she was placed with Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles in Elma, Washington.
And that placement wasn't short. It lasted for a considerable time, nearly 26 months, right?
That's right, almost 2 years. And the sources describe a really deep bond forming. Jamie Jo Hiles apparently recounted that fostering wasn't something they actively sought out initially.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but when Oakley came to them, it worked out. That's the phrase used. It felt like a dream come true for them.
You get a real sense from the descriptions, don't you? The photos, holidays, park visits, just goofy play.
Totally. It sounds like there was just so much love there.
And the Hiles even hoped to adopt her, which just underscores that bond. It paints a picture of stability and affection during that crucial early period.
And this period is also important context for understanding the stated goals of Washington's Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, as described in the materials.
Right, their official aim.
Exactly. Their aim is to limit the time children spend in foster care, find a permanent home quickly, and there's a strong prioritization placed on reunification with biological parents.
When deemed safely possible. That's always the crucial qualifier.
It is. And that goal led to what sounds like a devastating moment for the Hiles. In November 2019, after those nearly 26 months.
They were suddenly notified Oakley was being returned to her biological parents. Just like that.
Apparently quite suddenly, yeah.
Yeah.
The impact on the Hiles is just palpable in the sources. Jamie Jo Hiles is quoted saying they cried.
Oh, I can only imagine.
And essentially shut themselves away for months. She described the loss very starkly, so it was literally like a death.
Wow, that really highlights the emotional stakes, doesn't it? For everyone involved, not just the child.
Absolutely.
Now, here's where the timeline, according to these sources, becomes incredibly, opaque. After that reunification in November 2019, details about Oakley's well-being, her location, they just get scarce.
Very scarce. And DCYF, citing privacy laws, won't comment on the specifics of her case. That's a recurring theme here.
Right. And the reporting indicates that typically a child welfare case is closed within about 6 months of reunification, assuming the parents comply with certain conditions.
That's the general time frame, yeah.
Yeah.
So for Oakley's case, that would have put case closure around maybe May 2020.
Okay, May 2020. But the critical, really alarming detail highlighted by the sources is this. The last confirmed sighting of Oakley by anyone outside the immediate family.
According to law enforcement, yeah.
Wasn't until much, much later. February 10th, 2021, she would have been about 4 years old then.
A huge gap. And she wasn't reported missing until December 2021. That's nearly a year after that last confirmed sighting.
And the trigger for the alarm, according to the sources, it wasn't even direct concern about her initially, was it? It was a fire.
That's right. A fire at the family home. A school principal, apparently reaching out about a sibling, became concerned when Oakley wasn't mentioned or present.
So the principal contacted authorities.
Yes, which led to a welfare check by police on December 6th.
Which, tragically, was Oakley's 5th birthday.
Yeah, just awful timing. Detective Sergeant Paul Logan is quoted on the parents' reaction during that check. He described them as uncooperative.
Not helpful at all, then.
No. Responding with hostility and answers that didn't make any sense. That's the quote.
So, authorities then searched the family's property near Oakville, this rural property.
They did. The sources state they found evidence there, but crucially, not Oakley, not her body.
So no physical sign of her.
No. And based on the police statements reported, Det Logan indicated that at that point, investigators were operating under the assumption that she was dead.
A chilling conclusion to reach. It's important to note, though, that while formal charges directly related to Oakley's disappearance weren't filed, at least as of when these sources were published,
Right, that's key.
her biological parents, Andrew Carlson and Jordan Bowers, were prosecuted for crimes, but involving their other children.
Yes, the sources detail their legal troubles pretty clearly. Both pleaded guilty in the spring of 2022.
To what specifically?
Child endangerment with a controlled substance, basically exposing their other kids to methamphetamine.
Okay. And the sources give details on sentencing, too.
They do. Andrew Carlson got 12 months, but was released in less than 8. Jordan Bowers received 20 months, was released.
But then picked up again.
Immediately, yeah, on unrelated identity theft charges. And then she received a 43-month sentence for those.
So they both served time, but for issues separate from Oakley's actual disappearance.
Legally separate, yes. And the sources are very clear on this point. Despite these convictions and incarcerations, neither parent has cooperated with authorities regarding Oakley's disappearance.
And they remain suspects in her case.
They do.
And this is where the deep dive into the systemic questions really begins, doesn't it? Fueled by the questions and criticisms highlighted in your sources, particularly aimed at Washington's DCYF.
Exactly. This case, as it's presented in these materials, has really become a flashpoint for scrutiny on the state's child protective services.
The criticisms from Jamie Jo Hiles, Oakley's former foster mother, and also from this public petition, they're sharp. There's a strong feeling the reunification was rushed.
Yeah, that comes across clearly. Also, that monitoring afterwards was insufficient, especially, during the pandemic period, which complicated everything.
And that concerns reported by the Hiles to caseworkers, to CPS, were reportedly disregarded.
That's the allegation, yes. Jamie Jo Hiles doesn't mince words. She's quoted saying, DCYF and the state of Washington, they should be sweating bullets because they have completely dropped the ball.
That's a powerful statement. It really conveys the frustration found in these sources.
It does. In the petition, it specifically itemizes moments, drawing from police reports and court documents, apparently, where it argues the system missed crucial signals or failed to act.
Like what specifically? What are the key points the petition makes?
Well, one key moment it points to is a report back in January 2021. It described visible scratches and bruises on Oakley's face.
Okay, that sounds like a major red flag.
Absolutely. The petition notes DCYF did investigate this report, but it allowed Oakley to remain in the home, even though the parents were reportedly uncooperative during that investigation.
Allowed her to stay despite visible injuries and parental non-cooperation.
That's what the petition alleges based on the documents it cites. Then, just 2 months later, in March 2021,
Yes.
according to the petition, DCYF closed Oakley's case entirely.
They closed the case after that bruising incident investigation.
That's the timeline presented, and this is where that gap becomes so central to the criticism. Remember, law enforcement's last confirmed sighting of Oakley was February 10th, 2021.
Right, the month before they closed the case.
Exactly. So the petition zeroes in on this. DCYF closed her case in March 2021, and because the last confirmed sighting was the month before, they cannot actually confirm she was alive when they closed the case.
So the core question the petition raises is just stark. How could the case be closed without verifying her safety and well-being at that specific time?
Precisely. It's a fundamental question about procedure and, well, diligence.
And the petition points to even later missed opportunities, doesn't it?
It does. In November 2021, just before she was finally reported missing following that fire,
Yeah.
3 separate reports were apparently made to DCYF within a 2-day span. About the fire, about the parents not reporting it, about the unsafe living conditions.
3 reports in 2 days.
That's what the petition states. And it claims all 3 of those calls were screened out and ignored.
Screened out, meaning they didn't investigate further.
That seems to be the implication, yes. That they didn't meet the threshold for further action at that moment.
Wow. So what has DCYF said about all this? What's their official position?
Well, as reported, their official stance is that they cannot comment on specific cases, citing those privacy laws again.
Right, the privacy barrier.
But Secretary Ross Hunter, who was head of DCYF at the time, did speak more broadly. He highlighted the agency's overall success in reducing out-of-home placement safely, even during the pandemic. He called it a big win.
The big win.
Yeah.
Which, some might see that as a potential tension, right? A system focused on a macro-level metric, like reducing foster care numbers.
While critics are pointing to potentially catastrophic outcome in one specific individual case, it highlights that potential conflict.
Yeah.
The Washington State Office of the Family and Children's Ombuds, OFCO, that's the body that investigates complaints about DCYF, Their director, Patrick Dowd, actually spoke to this tension.
What did he say?
He talked about the balance required between the public's understandable desire for confidence and trust in the system.
And the legal need to protect family privacy. It's
Yeah,
a constant tightrope walk.
exactly. He said, on one hand, you do want public confidence, but we also want to be able to protect the families. It captures that dilemma.
Now, following the public outcry about Oakley, the sources note that the governor at the time, Jay Inslee, did order an investigation,
Right.
An internal one.
Yes, an internal investigation into DCYF's handling of Oakley's case, and it was led by that same ombuds office, OFCO.
Okay, so they investigated themselves, essentially. Or at least the state's watchdog investigated the state agency.
Kind of, yeah. And the petition reports that this internal review concluded DCYF's actions were deemed consistent with laws, policies, and court orders.
Consistent with policy, which might not be the same as right or safe in retrospect.
Well, the petition certainly critiques that finding strongly. It argues the internal investigation lacked impartiality and transparency, again citing how privacy laws limit the public detail available.
So a finding of consistent with policy, but still facing criticism for lack of transparency. What about other officials? Any responses noted in the sources?
Governor Inslee's office declined comment, citing privacy and the ongoing police investigation. A spokesperson's email response was noted as, well, maybe a bit dismissive.
How so?
It apparently stated it was a fine morning to cast aspersions.
Okay. Not exactly confidence-inspiring. What about legislators?
State Representative Tana Sen, who chairs a relevant committee, is mentioned. She's followed the case, spoken to community members.
And her take?
She isn't convinced, based on this case alone, that state law needs changing. She noted she expects a formal child fatality review if Oakley is formally declared dead.
If. So that hasn't happened yet.
Not as of these sources. Rep. Sen also mentioned her understanding was that the reunification happened after the parents completed a drug treatment program.
Which would seem like a positive step, if true.
Yes, but the reporting notes that this specific claim couldn't be independently verified by the news outlet.
Okay, so still some uncertainty there. All of this, the unanswered questions, the criticisms, it's led to significant public response, hasn't it? Capturing that petition.
Absolutely. That Change.org petition is a major piece of this story. It specifically demands an immediate independent agency review of DCYF's handling of Oakley's case.
Independent being the key word there, not internal.
Exactly. And it's targeting the current governor, Bob Ferguson, who was actually the attorney general when Oakley was first reported missing.
Interesting. And the petition argues there's precedent for this kind of review.
Yes, it points out that this isn't the first time reunification protocols have sparked major questions in Washington. It references a 2010 case that did lead to an external review.
So they're saying, it's been done before, do it again for Oakley.
That's the core demand.
And in the midst of all this, the tragedy and the systemic scrutiny, Jamie Jo Hiles, the former foster mother, expresses a hope. It's quite poignant, isn't it?
It really is. The sources capture her hope that something good might somehow come from Oakley's story, that Oakley herself can really save some kids' lives.
By forcing change.
Potentially leading to DCYF reforms, yes. Reforms focused more squarely, perhaps, on child protection rather than just reunification speed or numbers.
It's a heavy burden to place on missing child's legacy, but you understand the sentiment.
Completely. And then you have Detective Sergeant Logan, the police investigator. He offers this really pragmatic perspective that kind of highlights the gap between public feeling and legal reality.
What does he say?
He needs that everyone's concerned and everyone is looking at the situation like this is wrong. You know, the gut feeling.
Aye, the moral outrage.
But at the same time, he says, there's no law on the books for something just being wrong.
Oof. That's a stark reminder of the limits of the legal system sometimes. Just because something feels fundamentally wrong doesn't mean a specific law was broken or that accountability is straightforward.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean when we pulled together these threads from the sources you've shared? What's the bottom line here?
Well, the bottom line is we're looking at a case where a young child disappeared, is now presumed dead after being returned to biological parents.
Parents who were later convicted of crimes involving their other children and who crucially haven't cooperated on Oakley's whereabouts.
Correct. And alongside that personal tragedy, these sources reveal this significant, persistent set of questions about the state agency responsible for protecting children.
Questions raised by critics, by the public, about decisions made, potential signals missed, the adequacy of oversight, all in the period leading up to her disappearance finally coming to light.
Yeah. So, why does understanding this specific case matter for you, the listener? I think it really lays bare the immense stakes involved in every single child welfare decision.
It absolutely illustrates the incredibly difficult balance authorities have to strike, doesn't it? Between supporting families, aiming for reunification,
And the absolute non-negotiable need to ensure a child's safety.
and it highlights that tension we talked about between system-level goals like reducing the number of kids in foster care, which sounds good on paper.
And the devastating reality of an individual outcome when something goes terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And finally, I think it spotlights the inherent challenges of oversight and accountability in these systems. They're complex, often under-resourced.
And crucial information is frequently shielded by privacy laws, making full transparency really difficult.
It really is.
So, this deep dive into your sources, it leaves us with a really challenging thought to consider, doesn't it? While system goals are vital, and family reunification is often the best outcome when safe.
Right.
This case, as documented here, it forces the question, how do we truly ensure no child falls through the cracks? How can these systems effectively balance family privacy and procedural efficiency with that fundamental, absolute need to guarantee a child's safety?
Especially when the very people meant to provide that safety might be the source of harm, and transparency around the system's actions remains so limited. It's a question without easy answers.